want to ask you something. When was the last time somebody gave you some constructive feedback and your first instinct was just receive it gracefully, incorporate it thoughtfully, move on with your day? Right? Yeah, me neither. All right. About a week ago, a client asked me for a reshoot. Nothing major, just an adjustment. It's the kind of thing that happens in creative work all the time. And my first response, before I could catch it, before I was actually thinking with my brain, was just panic. And that was followed immediately by the urge to defend myself in a very long, very detailed email that I'm very glad that I never sent. Okay, look, I'm a grown woman. I'm a professional. I'm someone that's been doing this work for years. I have a really good track record with all of my clients. And a note on a creative deliverable, it nearly took me out, which kind of tells you something interesting. And it's not about the client and it's not about the work. It's really about what's still running underneath for me. Because here's what I've come to understand about myself. And I suspect maybe a lot of us, the strategies that we built to survive, a lot of times our childhood, they don't necessarily retire when you leave that, they just get new jobs. So the armor that I built growing up, it had a very specific design. So I grew up with a mother who, her standard was impossible, her judgment was constant. And no matter what I did, it didn't matter how capable, how good, how careful, never quite enough. And so I think I did what any reasonable child would do under those circumstances. I was like, I need to be perfect. Flawless execution, zero mistakes, nothing that can be criticized, okay? Nothing that can be taken apart. But here's the thing, it worked. Sometimes, in a very narrow sense. But I became very good at things. So I delivered excellent work. I have built a career on the back of standards that I think most people would find exhausting. I call it drive. I call it work ethic. I call it high standards. And then a client asks for a reshoot. I almost wrote a manifesto in response. Because here's what the panic was actually about. That reshoot, it wasn't a creative note. My nervous system did not receive that as a creative note. It received it as evidence that the gap between who I appear to be and who I actually am, it just became visible. And that's not a professional response. That's a child's response. That's the response of someone who learned very early that imperfection, that has consequences. And this is the thing that nobody tells you about the coping mechanisms that you built in childhood. They're not character flaws, and they're not really weaknesses. They are incredibly sophisticated survival strategies developed by a person who had very limited options. The perfectionism kept me safe. The hypervigilance kept me one step ahead. The emotional independence made sure I never needed anyone who might leave. And these things worked. So the problem isn't that they worked then. The problem is they're still running now. And they're running in situations they were never designed for. So a reshoot is not a threat to my survival. My nervous system simply has not gotten that memo quite yet, right? So that perfectionism, man, it has a really close cousin. And it can be a little hard to admit to, but it's the people pleaser. And I do want to be careful here because people pleasing sounds like a really sweet problem to have, right? Oh, she's so nice. She cares so much about people. And that is not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is that I say something in a conversation, and it could be with my husband, a friend, colleague, someone I literally just met and will never see again. And the moment words start leaving my mouth, I've got this voice that shows up. Did I say that right? Was that stupid? Should I have worded that differently? Oh God, what are they thinking about me right now? That wasn't funny. I replay it over and over, like surveillance footage, and I am reviewing every word for evidence of what I have done wrong. At 3 a.m, about a conversation that had happened 4 days ago with someone I will probably never see again, I am fully litigating a case. It's been dismissed by everyone that was involved except for me. All right, so here's what's interesting about that kind of inner critic that we have. And this really took a long time for me to understand. It doesn't sound like a critic, kind of sounds like wisdom. It kind of presents itself as self-improvement, as someone who is simply invested in how I show up. But it's not wisdom, okay? It's a 5-alarm fire. It's a system that was calibrated by someone that needed me to be really small. And it has been running on autopilot ever since. So here's the universal truth that's behind both of these patterns: perfectionism, people pleasing. We're all walking around with these operating systems installed in our childhoods. And most of us have never really checked whether those systems are still serving us or whether we're just serving them. I want to talk about, again, what's underneath all of it, because the perfectionism and the people pleasing, those are, I don't know, I guess like symptoms, right? The thing that they're actually protecting is really a lot deeper than that. And it's my personal deepest fear. And it's the one that's definitely underneath everything that I have built. And it's that I'm a fraud. That capable, warm, funny, put together woman that people see, that's a performance, a carefully constructed image. And that if really anyone looks close enough, they're gonna see through it. They're gonna see that I am actually really not that smart. I'm actually not that good of a person. And I am definitely not that put together. And they're gonna just see the gap between who I appear to be and who I actually am. And then they're gonna leave. Okay, this fear has a name. Psychologists call it imposter syndrome. I'm sure you've heard of it, but I wanna talk about what the psychology books maybe don't always say, at least not clearly enough. It's one of the most common human experiences that there is, okay? So it's not a sign that you're a fraud in actuality. It's almost always a sign that you're someone who just really cares deeply, that you've worked incredibly hard, and that you were just taught early that who you are is just not quite good enough. The people who don't feel it, they're really not more competent. They're often, I think, just less self-aware. I know, cold comfort at 3 a.m, trust me, I know. But I do believe that's true, I think. Okay, this morning, I read some of this that I was putting together to my husband, and his first response was kind of like shock. He was like, he's such a good man. He turned it inward to himself, and he goes, am I doing something wrong? Like, what's making you feel this way? And I realized, he has no idea. The man who shares my life, my bed, he couldn't see it. And I think it's because the performance is just that complete, right? And I think that's the loneliest thing about carrying this, is that it's not even that people judge you, but that the people who love you can't fully find you, see you. All right, why am I talking about all this? It's not because I think you need to know about my inner critic or my panic response to reshoots, but because I feel like if we are just all honest, I think some version of this is running in a whole lot of us, Maybe it's perfectionism. Maybe it's that 3 a.m. replay. Maybe it's the imposter fear. I don't know. Maybe it's something else totally, entirely different for you, your own very special version of armor that you have built for your own specific childhood. And look, I am not going to offer you a 5-step program for dismantling it because I don't have that. Sorry, but here's what I can do. I can offer you this. I promise you these patterns are not you. They're strategies that you developed because you needed them. They made complete sense given what you were working with, but you're not obligated to keep running them forever. So the first move, the only move that actually changes anything, is just to see them clearly, catch the panic response and say, oh, wait, I know what this is. This is the armor. It's doing its job, okay? This is a very old system responding to a current situation that was not designed for. And then just with that little bit of space, okay, between the trigger and the response to the trigger, I'm just gonna choose something different. Probably not gonna happen perfectly. It's not gonna happen all at once. And it's gonna be different than it was yesterday. That's what it's gonna be. I still feel the reshoot panic. I still do the 3 a.m. replay sometimes, and I'm still working on this stuff every single day. But I no longer believe that the armor is who I am, and that I feel like makes all the difference. All right, 55 years of running these patterns, and now the last few years actually seeing them. Okay, the version of me that people love, the capable, warm, impressive one, she is real. She's just not the whole story. And the parts of me that I have been hiding, the kind of uncertain parts, the things about me that I still feel like are very unfinished, the things I'm still trying to kind of figure out, the mistakes, the broken pieces, they're real too. And it turns out those are the parts that actually connect, not the performance. The person that's underneath that, right? The broken and beautiful and still figuring it out. That's the one that's worth knowing. And, has been worth knowing all along. I'm Deb Gorbenko. This is Beauty Brains Bubbly Uncorked. See you next week.